Let's talk about America. I mean, today it's the richest, most powerful country in history, right? But what's crazy is that its rise to the top, well, it was anything but a sure thing. In fact, for a long time, it was a place nobody really wanted. So how on earth did that happen? How did a continental afterthought become the leader of the world? Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, that's the big question we're going to tackle here. How did this colonial backwater, this continental consolation prize, transform into a global superpower?
Because the truth is, it was totally unexpected. I mean, for over 100 years after it was discovered, the big powers in Europe, they pretty much ignored North America. They had their eyes on a much bigger prize.
All right, so let's dive into that. The scramble for the new world. We're going to see how North America went from being the place nobody really wanted to becoming the main event. Okay, so what's super interesting here is what was driving this whole first wave of exploration. It wasn't about land, not at all. It was about treasure. You know, the first explorers came back and yeah, they didn't have the spices they'd promised, but they had something way better: gold. And that one thing, the promise of treasure, not territory, set the entire course for the next 100 years.
So here's the bottom line. Everybody followed the money. Simple as that. Spain, they went straight south to Central and South America, conquering the Aztec and Inca empires because that's where the gold was. Portugal, they were all about their trading empire over in Asia. And England, well, they pretty much sat on their hands for almost 100 years when it came to North America. France, they claimed this huge chunk in the middle, but they didn't really send many people over to live there.
And this right here, this shows you the huge problem France had. By 1754, right when things were about to explode into the French and Indian War, New France had a tiny population, like 60,000 people. Meanwhile, the British colonies, they were booming with over 1 million people. I mean, when you look at those numbers, the outcome of that war was kind of inevitable, wasn't it?
So, after the British won, the whole map of North America got redrawn. France was, for all intents and purposes, kicked off the continent. And just like that, Britain found itself in charge of this massive American empire. But here's the thing, ruling that empire was going to be a lot harder than winning it.
Yeah, because that difficulty, that lit a fuse. What started as a simple argument about who should pay for a war ended up creating a brand new nation, an entirely new kind of nation, actually. So check this out. Britain was basically broke from the war, right? So they turned to the American colonies and said, hey, you guys need to help pay for this. But the colonists' response was simple and it was powerful. They said, wait a second, how can you tax us if we don't even get to vote? See, this wasn't just about money. This was about a fundamental right. But after they won their independence, the brand new United States had a huge problem. Their first attempt at a government, it was a complete mess. You had these 13 colonies acting like 13 little independent countries, all squabbling with each other. The whole thing was failing, and it was failing fast.
So what do? The Founding Fathers go back to the drawing board. And in this incredibly short amount of time, just think about it. They go from declaring independence, to winning a war, to throwing out their first government and creating the Constitution. This was a radical new idea for a government that could actually, work.
Okay, so now they've got a new government that's working. The young nation turns its eyes west. And this next chapter, wow. It's all about the absolutely breathtaking speed of American expansion across the continent.
The country's growth basically happened in a few giant leaps. It was a mix of everything, really. Diplomacy, buying land, and straight-up conquest. It all kicked off with this shocking deal with France for the Louisiana Territory. Then came Florida from Spain, then they annexed the Republic of Texas, then a treaty with Britain for Oregon, and finally, a really controversial war with Mexico that gave them the entire Southwest.
In that first step, it might just be the most incredible real estate deal in all of history. For just $15 million, the United States instantly doubled in size. Just poof. But that begs the question, right? Why on earth would France sell an entire empire for pennies on the dollar?
Well, it all came down to one guy, Napoleon Bonaparte. He needed cash, and he needed it fast, to pay for his wars in Europe. His big dreams for an American empire, they could wait. So he sold the whole shebang, the entire Louisiana Territory, to the U.S., a decision that, no joke, would completely change the course of history.
So here's the takeaway. Through a mix of just incredible luck, some smart diplomacy, and one pretty ugly war with Mexico that a lot of people called a land grab, the United States now stretched from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. And it happened in just 50 years. an entire continent, claimed.
But while the nation was getting bigger on the outside, a deep, bitter division was growing on the inside. So this last part, it's about America's greatest test, the Civil War, and how, out of that fire, it finally emerged as a true world power.
The problem, the unsolvable problem, was slavery. It was an issue that had haunted the nation from the very beginning, and as the country expanded, the question of whether these new states would allow slavery or not, it turned into this incredibly bitter political fight. For the North, which was industrializing, it was more and more seen as a great moral evil. But for the South, which was built on agriculture, it was defended as the absolute foundation of their economy. The nation, it was on a collision course with itself.
In the election of Abraham Lincoln, that was the final straw. Southern states started to secede, and the country just plunged into a brutal civil war. To this day, it's the deadliest conflict in American history. After 4 long, bloody years, the North won, the Union was saved, and 4 million enslaved people were finally freed. But the cost was just immense.
Now, in the years after this brutal war, as the country was trying to rebuild, a really surprising opportunity popped up. Russia was worried it couldn't defend its territory over in America from the British, so they decided, hey, let's just sell Alaska. And the American Secretary of State at the time, a guy named William Seward, he jumped at the chance. He famously hammered out the deal in the middle of the night for just $7.2 million. And that purchase really marked a turning point. See, with the continent pretty much secured, America started to look outward. It started building this incredibly powerful navy and stepping onto the world stage for the first time. The Spanish-American War basically ended the Spanish Empire and left the U.S. in control of places like Puerto Rico and the Philippines. Not long after that, it annexed Hawaii. And the final piece of the puzzle? The Panama Canal, a massive engineering project that cemented American power over 2 oceans. The old colony had now become an empire itself.
Which brings us to our final question, a question that still kind of lingers today. For its first 100 years or so, America really tried to mind its own business. But as it got more and more powerful, annexing Hawaii, getting involved in Cuba, it started to aggressively mind its interests all over the globe. And that one decision, it set the stage for the entire 20th century, and it raises a question that America, and really any great power, is still grappling with.